Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you to my wife and for being here and for bringing my daughter, the little baby that you've heard. Engaging with the speakers has been my daughter, Gabriela. So, the title of this talk is Against Men, and intentionally the parentheses is around the end. And my hope is that by the end of this talk, you'll understand why that is. If not, we can sit down for lunch and talk a little bit more. I've spent the last 15 years fighting against the way I've been taught to be a man and learning how to be a man differently. It started for me at a kitchen table when I was in college my sophomore year. I got invited to a gathering. I went to a predominantly white school, so those of us who were students of color tended to stick together pretty regularly. So there was a group of 4 or 5 women that rented an apartment and were constantly inviting us over for dinner. And this was one of those times. I was sitting at the kitchen table playing cards, I think it was spades, with 3 other people. There were people in the kitchen cooking dinner, all of that stuff. And at one point while we were playing, one of the women who lives there announced that dinner was ready. So I'm sitting there, just kind of at the table, starting to clean up the cards. People are getting in line to go eat. And one of my friends at the time, Donnie Maroney, came up to me and whispered in my ear, "I don't know what they do at your house, but in my house, if you're hungry, you get your own food." For me, at that particular time, I was taken aback. I was thinking to myself, I don't know what this woman is talking about. She's crazy. Why she got to come up to me like that? And my outward response was, I'm just waiting for the line to die down, right? So I went about the rest of that evening. I got my food. I ate. The food was wonderful. A couple of days later, in the student government office at that campus, Donnie came up to me, sat down next to me, and said, "I want to talk more about what happened the other night." And I was like, I don't know if there's really anything to talk about, because I didn't know what she was referring to. So she began to kind of explain to me how she was impacted by me just sitting there waiting to be served. Like that was the kind of, that's what she grew up seeing with other people around her. It wasn't the way her family was, but it was the way that she saw other Latinos engaging in the ways it meant to be family, right? So she wanted to talk more about that, right? And she really, through a series of conversations, opened my eyes up to a lot of different things. My life changed not the day that she tried to call me out at the kitchen table, but it changed when she decided to take the time to sit down with me and ask me questions. It didn't change in the I became a new man overnight kind of way and automatically started changing the way I lived in the world. But it changed in the way that things change when you get a new prescription for glasses, right? So I recently started wearing these glasses. I had gotten the prescription a long time ago, but when I put them on, it was like getting HD TV after having regular TV for a long time. Things became so much clearer. Everything I experienced, I had a different way to think about, which then made me explore every memory from a different angle. I allowed myself to be vulnerable with others, but more importantly, with myself. I went home a couple weeks after that night and noticed things I hadn't noticed before. When we had dinner at our house, I remember that night when I went home and we ate, I was sitting at the table with my brother. My mom had cooked dinner. My sister was there. And I remember clearly my mom telling my sister to serve us food, me and my brother. My brother was sitting at the head of the table. The refrigerator was behind him. He asked his daughter to get him a soda. All he had to do was he literally didn't have to get up. He had to turn around, open the fridge, reach in, and grab his own, right? But, and it's not a value judgment on my family, right? We all have family members that we love, that do things that we may or may not agree with, right? But at the time, that was what I knew, right? So I began to see those types of things more clearly. I started to remember that when I was in high school, my mom would tell my sister to clean my room for me, right? I was just sitting on the couch watching TV, Days of Our Lives or something at the time, over the summer, right? So she would have to clean my room for me. I remember my sister being maybe a couple years older than my daughter, 2 or 3 years old, standing on a chair next to my mom, helping to put the dishes away as she was cleaning them, right? Not something that I ever had to do. If I was lucky, I got to mow the lawn outside, but I had an older brother, right? So he did all of that. What that did for me was it allowed me to start asking questions. One of the things I learned early on was about my father. I didn't grow up with a father, but I had never learned what it meant to ask about him. It was something that in my family we never talked about. I just knew that he was gone, that he lived in Rock Island, Illinois, not too far from here. So I began to kind of explore that, ask questions as a part of this idea of understanding who I was more clearly. And one of the ways in which I started kind of expressing that was through poetry. And I want to take a break from my talk to share a poem that I wrote over 4 years ago, but I think is really relevant to what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about here. And it's the poem is called The Story of My Birth in 4 parts. They're driving on a dirt road in Laredo, the place before I became. Mother gripping steering wheel like her past loosely. Brother, not a brother at the time, riding shotgun, too young to see more than air vents and glove compartment. My almost father in the back seat, stuck between passenger side door and a knife, gripped angrily in the hand of his best friend. He's bleeding into the leather cracks. He survives because I was meant to be here. My mother tells me when I'm old enough to understand what he deserved it means, that my father had spent nights pretending that man's wife was his own. He's not my father. He's not yours either. I've always told myself that when she is born, I will whisper to her while she sleeps in the arms of her mother. The sanitized scent of hospital still fresh against our skin. I will whisper to her, Mija, I will never be like the grandfather you will never meet. I will whisper to her, I love you. I have always loved you. I will always love you. My friends tell me that I will make a great father someday. I want to believe them, but I know that silver linings look better when they show themselves in smiles, and I'm just learning to do that. He's not my father. He's not yours either. My brother doesn't remember riding shotgun, doesn't remember his father cowering underneath the car just out of reach of death. He doesn't remember his own cries mimicking his mother's screams like a recorder. I wonder if that's the last time he cried for him, our father, who hasn't reached heaven yet, whose aging body sits aching in a one-room apartment not too far from us but out of reach from our desire to know him. My brother, the father, held his first for the first time at the entrance to the hospital. Sliding door stuck open. He didn't think to move. His body frozen in that moment. His smile filled with the tears he's always felt were better left hidden behind things or tucked inside empty bottles like messages hoping for a reader. Tell me, what happens to hugs left heavy against our skin when they no longer resonate the I love yous that created them? Looking at him was the mirror I'd been trying to avoid, but dead hugs don't wash away like dead skin, and I realized that I'm unmistakably his son and him unwittingly my father, and I'm coming to understand my brother, the father, when he tells me he was never my father, he was never yours either. I'm here to tell you that all it takes is a moment and some compassion to push boys and men. It's not easy when the headlines are about men engaging in horrible behavior, but we can't throw our babies out with the bathwater, which is what we've been doing so far. Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote in an article for The Atlantic where he introduced me to the concept of muscular empathy. It was more than about walking in somebody else's shoes. It was about forcing us to understand the why behind someone's behavior or the why not. The President of the United States not too long ago said that if he had a son, he would look like Trayvon Martin. If I had a son, he would be more like George Zimmerman. That's important for us to think about, right? That's important for me, and that's why I do the work that I do, because there are more George Zimmermans in the world. There are more, and I think the important thing is that incident, that tragedy is more than just about race. It's about gender and masculinity, but that isn't being talked about. And it isn't until we start talking about that and the ways in which we learn how to be men impact our ability to be successful, impact our ability to engage each other in conversation, our ability to be vulnerable, that we can begin to see change in the ways that men exist in the world. If we can move away from asking, how could someone do that, to asking ourselves, why would someone do that, we can begin to build the type of compassion to create better men, to help men move against the fear that exists in wanting to be different. Donnie had that compassion for me. She had the patience to listen, to ask questions, to challenge me to become a better man, a better person, to push me to stand up to the fear. She had the courage and the compassion to hug me. She graduated that year, so it became up to me to do the work. And along the way, I've had other people that have showed the same level of compassion, but unfortunately, the journey has been primarily a solitary one. In some ways, that's been mostly intentional. It's easy to change our outward behavior to be what those around us expect us to be. It's the reason people are able to say, that's not the man I knew. That's not the person that I knew that would do X, Y, or Z. But our outward behavior doesn't always mirror our internal dialogue, especially as men. That's what's more difficult to change. So that's my challenge to the men in the room, to pay attention to how we think about the world and the people around us, to challenge the idea that boys will be boys, to face the fear that comes along with being different, to hug with every bit of love and passion we have our boys and men, because our lives depend on it. Thank you.